going to talk about the value chain and run a very practical session on mapping your value chain and what you need to know about that. Whistle Stop Tour. I'm Denise Taylor. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Wylde Connections. We're a sustainability and learning organisation, and basically we help companies to develop and implement their sustainability strategies, and we also help them to upskill their teams and contractors. So we provide a lot of training. We're an accredited training centre for IEMA, which is the sustainability body. I'm joined today by my very capable and able team who form most of the audience. So if you have any questions later, you can ask any of us. And thank you, Aidan, for being my audience as well. So what I'm going to run through today is what the bigger picture is around sustainability. So we'll look at some of the risks and opportunities. Quick introduction to what a value chain is, and I think most manufacturers here today would understand the value chain, but let's revisit that. A little bit of an exploration of ecosystem services, the use of raw materials. We were planning a group activity, but if you want to do a group activity, Aidan, with us, that's great. just to put some practical aspects to it and how you can use the value chain model as a strategic tool. And then we'll look at some of the steps to becoming sustainable. I think most people these days don't know where to start when it comes to sustainability and sustainability strategy. And what we're hearing is net zero and the net zero carbon tunnel vision. So that's when most companies start their journey. And if we have time, there'll be a Q&A and then some next steps. So just to take a look at what that bigger picture is, as I've mentioned, we see sustainability in terms of environment and net zero and decarbonisation, but sustainability is much bigger than that. There's a much bigger picture to it. And what that means for businesses is managing those risks and opportunities around sustainability. But what does that mean in practical terms, and what are the pressures from that bigger picture of sustainability? So what we're hearing about at the moment is, climate change is affecting us. We've got declining ecosystems, and they're all having impacts across different areas of business life and different business functions. And where this ties into value chain mapping is when we're looking at using the Earth's resources. How does this all affect that? What are our impacts on the environment? What are our impacts on society? But also, what are those feedback loops and impacts back onto our businesses? And every single business, whether you're large or small, is affected by these global megatrends. And so it's important for business leaders to really understand that bigger picture in order to know where to start and what to look at in terms of your business. Now, what we're hearing in the news and in the media is very much doom and gloom. We're hearing about climate breakdown, we're hearing about biodiversity loss, we're hearing about all the impacts of that, and certainly we've got to mitigate against the risks of all of that change and what's happening in the world globally. But equally, there are opportunities from sustainability as well. And it's this side of it that is not very much explored in terms of business. We're all being told, decarbonisation, get your net zero in place, do your strategies. But we need to explore what's happening in terms of opportunities as well, and looking at our business models and looking at what those opportunities present. And a little bit later in this presentation, I do have a slide on the business opportunities, just to unpack that and give some more detail to it. So what is a value chain? I've got an audience of 2 now, so welcome. Rest of my team. I think a lot of manufacturers understand what a value chain is, but I wanted to do this exercise because this is a strategic tool that businesses can use, and it's not very much used in businesses to really understand operations and processes and where efficiencies can be made, but also from a sustainability point of view to understand our impacts. And that includes understanding the positive impacts as well as any negative impacts that we might be having, and what that means across that actual value chain. So right from the raw materials that come out of the ground or wherever they come from, the inbound logistics into your business, the producing the products and what happens through that manufacturing process, how you then distribute and do the outbound logistics to your customers, how the products are used, and then we've got that very important end of life cycle. So what happens to products and materials when they come to the end of life, to end of use? Do they go back into the value chain, or do they have an impact on the environment and society? And it's these things we need to be paying a lot more attention to now. And part of that conversation, when you're looking at a value chain, everything we have in life, everything we do, everything we touch in our personal lives, in our businesses, somewhere along the line comes from the earth. It comes from natural resources. And this is where the term ecosystem services come in. And when you look at ecosystem services, some academics have grouped those into the different levels of ecosystem services. So you've got services that provide medicines, you've got services that provide food, so you've got provisioning, you've got cultural services, so when you're out in nature and enjoying a woodland walk or down by the river, so there's the cultural aspects of ecosystem services. But when we're looking at it from a manufacturing point of view, and you walk around SUBCON today and the manufacturing shows that are taking place in the other halls, there's product all around us, and most all of these products have come somewhere in their raw materials from the earth, whether they've been mined out of the ground or whatever, however they've been resourced. Ecosystem services are providing those for us. And they comprise many, many different materials. And so when we're looking at the materials and how they're used, we need to start now looking at the impacts from getting them out of the ground to end of life and in production, and what happens in that manufacturing process. And what we need to be looking at is more sustainable business practice. So how can we keep materials in the value chain? How can we use materials to improve energy efficiency? And I'll give you an example of that. We work with an outdoor furniture manufacturer, and they make products, lovely furniture for your garden benches, chairs and tables, and they make those from recycled plastic. So your PET bottles, your plastic water bottles, all end up in these products. So they get thrown away, they're collected, recycled, turn into brand new plastic, and then they end up in furniture. That's very heavy. They end up in forms, plastic forms, which are planks basically, but it's heavy material. And what they're now looking at as part of their strategy is lightweighting those products. So they're looking at alternative raw materials and looking at taking the weight out of the products, redesigning the product. And what that will do, it'll be more efficient, use less materials, it's more efficient to carry out the logistics, so there's less energy used in getting the product to the customer, and lots of other benefits around that. Cheaper, so it's more cost effective. So that's just one example of how we can start to look at what's going on with our products, how can we re-engineer them, redesign them, how can we lightweight them. There's a lot of lightweighting going on in the automotive sector, using different materials, same in aerospace and aviation. How can we make those more energy efficient and less damaging to the environment? So in looking at mapping your value chain, what a value chain is, it's one strategic tool that we use at Wylde to help a business understand where they are on their sustainability journey. So we take a deep dive into the business and say, okay, what are you doing? What are your business operations? Where do your materials come from? Who are your suppliers? Who are your customers? Where are they based? What transport have you got, inbound and outbound logistics? So we look at the whole business. What social good are you doing? How do you treat your staff? Everything across that environment, social and governance, the factors across all those ESG. And there are a number of different frameworks that you can use. So many businesses say, where do I start with all of this? And it's really confusing, lots of confusing messages. But there's some very easy steps you can take, and there are frameworks that you can use. One of the frameworks we use when mapping the value chain and doing a materiality assessment, and a materiality assessment is where you look at what's important to your business but what's also important to your stakeholders. So you look at key factors on that. We use the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a framework to help develop the action plan. So it's just a tool. The UN Sustainable Development Goals were developed some time ago as part of the Millennium Assessment. They are used by countries throughout the world. So it's 17 goals, and there's on there there's goals like ending poverty, and there's gender equality, and life on land, life below water, lots of goals to look at. But what they provide is a framework that you can then take actions on. So if you're looking at no poverty, what actions can you take in your business to reduce poverty? That's a social goal. So how can you achieve that? So paying a fair living wage, for example, is one of the ways that a business can look to take action on reducing poverty and reducing inequality. Lots of other examples that don't have a great deal of time to go into all the goals today, but it is a framework and it's a really useful tool. So if you look at the sdgs.un.org, loads of really great information on there, and as I say, do use it as a tool. Now when you're looking at value chain mapping, Charlotte, can you give more on here? What we do is map the positive impacts and the negative impacts using the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a tool and a framework and looking at those actions. So when you look at that value chain, we'll just go on to the next slide. I've started to put some examples on this. So in doing the increasing your positive impact, where are you increasing the positive impacts using those UN Sustainable Development Goals? So if you've got social goals and social actions that you're taking and you're having a positive impact, then that obviously goes above the line. But you're also looking at the same time increasing your negative impacts. And this is where you need to understand your value chain and your supply chain. There can no longer be any excuse for not understanding where your raw materials come from when you start to look at the legislation. And something as key as, do you have modern slavery in your supply chain? Do you know that you don't? Have you done your supply chain due diligence when it comes to your value chain? And these are the things that as businesses, you're going to have to understand and get to grips with if you haven't already. And these are some of the tools that you can use to do that. So just going back to this slide, I chose 3 goals that are typically across the value chain, probably on most value chains, because these are the ones that most people understand and know about. So for us as manufacturers and in business, then the industry innovation and infrastructure would be an obvious one to use. But also climate action. Climate action affects every business. Now, are you taking action to mitigate climate impact, or are you, what impacts do you have? How negative are they? And how can you have that positive impact? And life on land, if you're pulling up materials out of the ground, there's an environmental impact. So when you're looking at the materials that you're using and all the components, there is an environmental impact. So just going back to those, each one of those we've looked at steel, aluminium, plastics coming from oil and the gas, etc., and carbon fibres. So understanding those impacts is really important. So what we wanted to do was, we've only got a small audience today, we wanted to do a little bit of a group exercise on this, and I'm not so sure how we're going to achieve this, but these are some of the questions, and there's a lot more questions when we do a deep dive into the value chain with our clients as a strategic tool. We ask a lot more questions than this, but I'd like you to just for a few minutes give some thought to that, or we can just have some active discussion around it. I can't hear very well up here. So, from within the audience, would there be any questions that you would like to think about, or things we can...
I would just like we don't make anything, so I can answer that question.
Okay, so you're a service-based business?
We were in charge of promoting sustainable education, sustainability in education.
Okay.
So I'm very happy to do an exercise like that.
Okay, so from a services, I've done this for the manufacturing audience because we're at a manufacturing show, but we also do this, there's a services value chain as well. So the only bit you're going to be missing, if I just go back, you're not going to have the company operations from a manufacturing point of view, but every business, even a service-based business, you've got suppliers coming in, and if you're working with people, you've got your social values and your social commitments that you need to look at. So you could still apply this to a service-based business. Obviously we're looking at raw materials today, but it would be interesting from a layperson point of view to get your understanding of it in terms of, impacts and what might happen in a manufacturing value chain. Have you given any considerations? You can look around you here, there's lots of shiny bits on that stand over there. Where have all those materials come from? So that's kind of where we're at in terms of mapping it. And looking at that stand over there, they've got, I would say, a range of different materials that they're using, and when you're doing your supply chain due diligence, that's where they'll probably come from different parts of the world. So, any questions so far? Aidan, on your from your business.
Business near the
Hang on, sorry, you're going to get a mic.
We are a public transport company.
Yes.
So, the company is subject to government and local national policy with clean air.
Yes.
So, already the business is being affected, the pressure from the clean zone in London.
Yeah.
That is now being copied in all the major cities.
Yeah.
Manchester, Nottingham, Birmingham, and so forth. So, effectively, you have to introduce clean buses there.
Yes.
Diesel engine is gone, diesel buses gone. Bring electric train buses on the roads. So that's the massive investment, direct action that company has to take in order to keep the business. And so globally, the company is subject to that regulation.
Yes.
But obviously, because there's so many other nuances that you
Yeah.
but that's more internally, it's a long journey to go. But the biggest impact in terms of clean air, the bringing of the electric trains, electric buses.
Yeah.
So that is where we are.
And the discussions around electrification are quite interesting as well, because there are lots of fors and against on electrification, so there's still an impact. So we're saying, yes, it's a greener energy, but you've got the batteries, and where does the material for the batteries come from, and have you done your supply chain due diligence on?
We haven't done end-to-end supply chain, and how far we want to take the supply chain.
Exactly. And then what happens afterwards when those buses are retired?
For all the picture that you're painting, we haven't really, we've only touched a portion of it.
That's interesting, because I would have imagined for a company the size of Arriva that would have been, quite a lot of discussion around what that supply chain looks like.
Due to the pressure of the, in terms of maintaining and operating team in the business, say Birmingham wants to questions you raise, it's still is ongoing debate going on.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
is still, there is no fixed solution for.
No, there isn't. And also you have things like hydrogen into the mix.
Well, that we are into that. That is at the moment is on the feasibility study.
Yeah.
Also hydrogen definitely. But in terms of the actual practical immediate impact, we have to introduce electric buses. And obviously it's ongoing, as you rightly highlighted.
Yeah, yeah. And we do need a mix in that transition, because what people forget is that this is a transition period as well. It's not a one or the other or an either or. We're in transition to get to, cleaner and more efficient energy use, and sometimes we have to make that transition in a measured way, because you can't just switch off one energy source and then immediately move to another one overnight.
But I can say surprisingly, a lot of local authorities are pushing this.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
pressurizing the bus companies to change their buses from diesel to electric.
Yeah, yeah, and there is a good strong case for that. We need the pressure, because otherwise we won't act.
Since major city centres,
Yeah.
they want clean air.
Yeah.
That's the number one. So it's a conflict of priorities.
Yeah.
Which is the priorities.
Yeah, yeah, and then you get into the whole discussion around trade-offs, then, don't you? So you've then got to have, really good debate around that. What are the trade-offs? What does that mean in terms of the impacts when you start to look at that value chain? What are the trade-offs that we need to make? And it's very, very complex when you start to dig into sustainability properly. It's such a complex area, but driven strategically, at least you can back up those decisions that you're making with data. Hopefully, we've got a lot of data now that's available to us. The other thing that's driving the pressure at the moment, and this comes directly from a client of ours in the construction industry, and they work for, I'm not going to name names, but they work for one of the large developers, construction developers, and this is what they're being asked for now. So, you need to understand your value chain. This is what they're saying in their RFQs and in their contracts and tenders. And if you can't demonstrate that you're dealing with this in your value chain, and that you are able to prove your sustainability credentials, then you're going to not be on preferred supplier lists, and that's going to be a big deal for a lot of businesses that don't have that. This is from this particular developer have said you need to follow the PAS guidance. That's a publicly accessible system. It's a quality system, but you need to have that guidance. You need to be adhering to this as a guidance. It is benchmark, but they are scrutinising this now with our clients, and this is from this week, so it's very, very current, and this is what's happening. That's just one of the pressures. Lots of pressures are now starting to materialise. So the business case for sustainability, when we're looking at that bigger picture, we've got a lot of risks to mitigate, that's undoubted, and we've got to take urgent action. But we're in business. We're all about feeding people, and we're all about growing and having thriving and sustainable businesses in the financial sense. So we've got to have businesses that can support people, support families, support communities. And so what are the opportunities? We're getting all this pressure, but what are the opportunities on this? And when you start to look at your value chain, there's lots of opportunities, and we do whole workshops just around this one slide. We unpack that. But when you're looking at the value chain, what we're kind of looking at is the savings and efficiencies. It's also the innovation. So can you look at alternative raw materials with lower impact? And what does that mean? And what are the trade-offs on that? So when you've got things like aerospace, where you've got, safety is critical and paramount in the rail sector, what are those trade-offs in terms of safety? So there's all of these complex things we need to consider, but innovation and technology has a key part to play in helping to underpin those efficiencies, to help us to increase our profits and reduce the costs for us. And then when you start to talk about what you're doing from a sustainability point of view, and you can shout about the good stuff, then you start to get into having an enhanced reputation. So, it does really affect how you're perceived out there. We can all, point to companies that have a bad reputation when, they're paying their staff less than the minimum wage, and all of those factors come into this. This is all about sustainability. So very strong case for sustainability in business. And if you would like a copy of these slides, then I'm more than happy to send them to you. So we have a 5-step program at Wylde Connections that we take our clients through, and that's assess, develop, implement, engage and transform. And these 5 steps are part of that assess and develop process, and it's quite an in-depth, robust process. If you're going to do this, you need to do it properly because it makes good sense. At the end of the day, you're looking to become ethical and responsible as a business, have good governance. And if you've got good governance and you understand all these business processes from a strategic point of view, then you understand your business and you've got a good business. There's a good business case for it. But there's a lot of confusion around sustainability. Most people think it's around the environment, and it's that very narrow focus. So we need to look a lot broader than that. So the first step is to really understand where you're at now on your sustainability journey. Are you compliant is the first question. Are you up to date with all the legislation and the increasing legislation? And you're going on from there. We have a staircase, business staircase that maps all of that. Then once you've understood where you're at, our process takes between 3 and 6 months to do that, to do the really deep dive into the business. You start to look at, okay, what is that? You visit your vision and mission and your values and your culture and get that really established so that you can embed sustainability across your organisation. And then once you get to that point, you've really got down into the business. You can identify the gaps, you know where the gaps are because you've done due process on it. So it's easy to see where the gaps are, and it's then easy to see what action you need to take. And then you can develop a roadmap, and a roadmap can be your short-term goals and wins. So it doesn't have to happen, everything overnight. There will be things within every business that will have a medium-term goal attached to it, and there'll be some longer-term goals. Sustainability is a journey, it's not a destination. It's about best business practice. So when you look at a business and a growing business, you're just looking to continuously improve as you're going along. And it's the same with sustainability. Look at what you can do now, look at what you can do in the medium term given your resources, and look at what you can do in the longer terms. And then you need to implement those actions and engage with all your key stakeholders. And you need to be held to account on implementing those actions. And that's where increasing legislation also plays a part, as well as your supply chain and your value chain. So you'll feel pressure from customers, but you'll also feel pressure from employees and other stakeholders. So it's important that you engage with all of them. And the bit that is really good is if you review that regularly and you start to map your achievements and you start to look at, we're doing great. We do a really nice sustainability report for our clients. It's a professionally produced document after the whole process they've been through. You can start shouting about that and attracting more business. You know you've got the credentials to apply for tenders and contracts. You can demonstrate your sustainability credentials. And we're now at the point in terms of what we're doing is our clients are winning King's Awards, because they can demonstrate their sustainability and stand by it, and they're winning awards for this stuff. So, and then you have a snowball effect. I don't know what I'm doing for time. About 40 minutes in. Yeah, I'm good? Yeah, okay. So we're Wylde Connections. We're a sustainability consultancy learning organisation. We help clients to develop and implement their sustainability strategies and also to embed that. So we can do anything from developing environmental management systems, whether that's 14,001 or a bespoke one, help with supply chain due diligence. We can do carbon calculations. It's all around sustainability. Sustainability is our core business. And we do a lot of training. We're an accredited training centre for IEMA, so if you're a slightly larger organisation, you might have a sustainability manager or somebody who wants to become a sustainability manager and needs training, or you might just need to train your staff on, you know, what is sustainability all about, and have that aligning with your culture and your values. So when you've gone through the whole strategic process, you want to embed that, but you want to take your whole team with you. Everybody within your business needs to understand what you're doing around your sustainability goals and around your sustainability achievements, because there's a lot to shout about. So we're running a workshop next week at the Manufacturing Technology Centre for those of you who are relatively local. Limited spaces on that. I think we've got about 4 spaces left. In that one, we're going to unlock contract opportunities, so we're going to have a look at what contracts are now including in terms of their RFQs on sustainability. What questions are they asking for you to be on those tender lists? So if you do want to come along to that, speak to my good friend and colleague Eleanor over there, and she'll get you organised on that. And there's also a tour of the MTC as well. The MTC is an amazing facility, so if you've never been, it's absolutely worth going to the MTC. And we're launching, for smaller businesses, but anybody who's not got the time, we're launching a sustainability strategy masterclass. So we've taken our whole consultancy programme and distilled it down into a self-directed, self-serving programme, which takes about 6 weeks to do. Requires you to do all of the work rather than us hand-holding you, but it is a more cost-effective option if you have somebody within the team who can take that on board. Do take a photograph of the QR code. That takes you to our contact details, and I'm happy to also have any discussions with you, discovery calls, so please do feel free to book a discovery call. The QR code will take you to our contact details. My colleague Charlotte's put loads of lovely juicy stuff on there. When you do go through to that, there's access to some ebooks as well, and I think the reporting ebook is on there. So we've done an ebook around what you need to know when you're doing your reporting around sustainability and your carbon calculations. So thank you for being a small but lovely audience, and thank you for your participation, and yours too. I'm happy to answer any questions. We've got the graveyard shift here, but you know, we're not dashing off, so if anybody's got any questions, then I'm more than happy to answer them, and thank you for listening.